Hello, everyone, and welcome to the end of Open Access Week. Hopefully, this is going to be a very good and interesting session to end the week off. I'm not sure if everyone's been to a lot of events or not this week, but it looked like it was really good and jam-packed full of exciting things to do. And today we are talking about community and commercialization in relation to biomedical preprint servers. I'm going to start off with Jennifer Lynn giving a talk more, I think, about the community side of things. And then we've got three different preprint servers here who are going to then do a nice panel Q&A session. So start scratching out your questions now for them all. I've got a couple, but I really want to open it up as much as possible to everyone who's attending to ask questions. After that, we then have what I'm hoping is going to work, a whiteboard little session so everyone can basically pretend you are a preprint server and you've just been dropped into it and see how you would do running it, what decisions you would make, which I'm hoping might actually not only help everyone in attendance to think a little bit about some of the things that certainly as a user of preprint server, I don't always think about. But maybe, hey, maybe some of the preprint servers here might get inspired by some of the ideas you write as well. Maybe someone out there has the sustainability solution. If you do, I suggest you keep it to yourself and like sell it because you'll make a fortune. Which is not in the spirit of open access. So to get started, I'm going to hand over to Jennifer Lynn, who is a consultant and sits on the ASAP board of directors and is going to give you a great talk that I'm very excited for. Jennifer?
Thank you so much, Johnny, and welcome everyone. Appreciate you attending on a Friday. It's for some of y'all at the very end of day. My name is Jennifer Lynn. As Johnny introduced, I've been working as a consultant. Prior to that, I was at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and have also done stints as a product director or product manager at Crossref and PLOS. Let's get started today. Been thinking about the theme of the OA week, community and commercialization. And obviously we're here to really think about this with the lens of biomedical preprint servers. To get us started, just want to set the scene. Start by acknowledging that there are now over 50 preprint servers for the biomedical community, each with their unique audience and setup, org structure, publishing and editorial practices, tech platforms. Many are owned or closely affiliated with for-profit publishers, each contribute varying number of publications. Let's take a look at this growth rate of papers between just this set of preprint servers. Note, I did not bring in archive nor SSRN because my dimensions data that I had access to did not exclude for those preprints that were not in the biomedical realm. So they're not in this view. Which ones are experiencing the highest volume of publications by year? We see Bio and Med Archive here, run by Cold Spring Harbor Labs, Research Square here, cutting a wide swath above it associated with Springer Nature. Here's a look at how these preprint servers are doing year on year. So the rate of change over time. Displayed are the figures comparing change from the prior year. We're seeing trends across the board that reflect the surge of preprints during COVID. Yay! Now a drop back down. The same as the previous graph showed. Certain servers are growing, albeit not at the prior clipped pace, while others are contracting. It's in this context that we arrive at community over commercialization as this year's International Open Access theme. The aim was to encourage a candid conversation about which approaches to open scholarship prioritize the best interests of the public and the academic community and which do not. To go back to the origin of this phrase, the UNESCO recommendation on open science highlights the need to prioritize community over commercialization in its calls, quote unquote, for the prevention of inequitable extraction of profit from publicly funded scientific activities and support for non-commercial publishing models and collaborative publishing models with no APCs. It was a vision outlined when open access was first defined, an old tradition and a new technology converged to make possible an unprecedented public good. So let's take a step back to ask, what does that mean for preprint servers, where right now there are no APCs? It has its own unique contours and relationships between commercial and non-commercial players in the broader scholarly ecosystem. It's been an interesting, a journey focusing on this special class of research with this theme for me, all the more critical given how central preprints are in advancing scientific knowledge today. I'll start by sharing some reflections on the theme, posit that POSI, which I'll go into, can offer us an actionable way forward in this question, this problem's surface, and then move to considering our biomedical preprint servers in this POSI framework. Okay, forward. Firstly, when I originally approached the question, I wondered, what is commercialization? Is it the reverse side of community? Is one a business model and the other a generalized orientation? Is this dyad a dichotomy on the same axis? But before we wade into the semantic and etymological depths, I came back up with the recognition that when commercial interests are prioritized over those of the communities that research seeks to serve, grave concerns justifiably arise. And we've seen the impact time and time again more broadly. Huge barriers to entrance, which throw up walls for researchers, some of which cannot be climbed over. Knowledge transmissions that hit dead ends or slow to a crawl. Unwillingness to collaborate on the most pressing and largest issues facing human health. Perverse incentives that lead to transgressions of scientific integrity, enclosure of communities, etc. What is lost when a shrinking number of corporations control knowledge production rather than researchers? What is the cost of business models that entrench extreme levels of profit? When does the collection and use of personal data begin to undermine academic freedom? Can commercialization ever work in support of the public interest? I'd like to posit that these justifiable concerns are part of a broader issue with trust. So pull back out. These broader issues have grown today to numerous tentacles covering different dimensions in the practice and the process of doing science. Trust eroding in the process of research, the publishing process, the business of research, for us to trust what institutions and systems do remain, for us to trust our own ones that we're associated with. What does this look like? POSI was developed to describe this very thing. It was developed for scholarly infrastructure providers to anchor themselves to specific attributes so that as they inevitably evolve over time, they will abide in continuing to serve their community. POSI proposes 3 areas that an open infrastructure organization can address to garner the trust of the broader group: accountability with governance, funding with sustainability, and protection of community interests with insurance. It proposes a set of concrete commitments that an organization can make to build community trust in each area. There are 16 such commitments. Firstly, governance, the establishment of policies and continuous monitoring of their proper implementation by the members of the governing body of an organization. And to balance the powers of the members and their primary duty of enhancing the prosperity and the viability of the organization. Governance ensures that the service takes your needs of the community and others into account. It runs the gamut, really getting at, how is governance, how does governance work, who gets to participate in it, etc. Sustainability, the second area, the ability or the process of maintaining change over time, as we will do, in a balanced fashion, such that it continues to be sustained, supported, upheld, or confirmed across time. Financial sustainability is a key element of creating trust. No other way around it. Trust, though, often elides multiple elements, intentions, resources, checks, and balances. An organization that is both well-meaning and has the right expertise will still not be trusted if it does not have sustainable resources to execute on its mission. It helps us feel better about the question, how do we ensure that an organization has the resources to meet its obligations? Insurance, the third leg of this chair or stool. And it's about providing protection, defense, safeguard, guarantee of community interests. even with the best possible governance structures, critical infrastructures can still be co-opted by a subset of interested parties or simply drift away from the needs of the community. That happens. But long-term trust requires that the community believe it retains control. Many of y'all are familiar at this point with the open source community models that serve as instructive reference here. Forking, to ensure that open source communities can take control if necessary, the infrastructures must be forkable. The community can replicate the entire system if the organization loses the support of stakeholders, interested parties, despite all established checks and balances. Each crucial part is legally and technically available for replication, including software systems and content data. Obviously, forking carries a high cost, and in practice, it would always remain challenging. That's just the practical reality. But the option to recreate the infrastructure can create confidence in the system itself. These three areas, accountability with governance, funding with sustainability, and protection of community interests with insurance, are explicated in concrete ways for an open infrastructure organization to address and to garner the trust of the broader group. All right, so if we are to trust our preprint servers, critical pieces of scholarly infrastructure, we ask, how are our preprint servers governed? Do they balance the powers of the members of the community and those who are held accountable with their primary duty of enhancing the viability of the preprint server? Do they ensure that the service takes the community's needs into account over time? Are the financial goals, current revenue sources, of which there may not be many to speak of at this point, and current fiscal conditions supporting the server's ability to be supported across time? Do the preprint servers have policies which provide protection or security against the possibility of being co-opted by a small set of its community or simply drift away? How well do our preprint servers meet the principles of open scholarly infrastructure? Given that we are here under the auspices of OA Week, I wondered about the state of preprint publications and open access itself, or open data in the POSI principles. There's a known diversity of preprint servers and policies around licensing. Take, for example, this preprint, which is all rights reserved, allowing no reuse without permission from bioRxiv. Amongst the group of CC licenses, as we all know, there is quite a bit of variance. Let's take a look at the historic distribution of preprints across servers which are just CC licensed. This is an interesting view for me. In the orange here, we have those that are fully OA, CC BY or higher. All the other colors, not OA. We are seeing some interesting views on the left, the all-time cumulative, as well as the last full year's worth of data in 2022. Servers that are very much OA in its preprint corpus, as well alongside servers that are heavily colored, heavily not OA. BioMedArchive, ChemArchive. This gave me a lot to think about in the framework of open access, open data as an insurance against infrastructures which cease to serve the community in this fashion, along this dimension. But POSI is not in the business of giving out ratings like Moody's, Fitch's, Standard & Poor's, or rankings. As an overlord somehow above the fray, no longer subject to the same impulses or tendencies. POSI is premised on organizations who step up on their own to commit to a set of principles, providing transparency on where they stand at a certain moment in time. These are records of 2 POSI posse members who have made their current status and commitments transparent to the community they serve. But we as a community, the community, also have a responsibility for keeping our critical infrastructure players accountable to us. And so I invite you to ask these questions of each other, of ourselves, and to our preprint servers. Can we trust that you will not disappear altogether or adopt a radically different focus, move towards enclosure? That as your services have expanded, you continue to remain grounded in your roots of good scientific practice, continuously show how your organization is durable, the long-term model is sustainable, and that governance is truly open and transparent. POSI is a framework to help us as a community to hold ourselves accountable, provide direction to building a scholarly ecosystem that best supports the advancement of scientific progress. We have nowhere near this place with preprint servers, as just the license distribution data shows. In some ways, we are far, far from it.
Hello. Hello.
So in summary, just to sum up, positing that perhaps POSI can offer us a practical way to identify the attributes of the organizations in that very future ideal world, where community is best served when they trust the infrastructure, as POSI lays out concrete principles that lie at the basis of trustworthiness, and to prioritize the best interests of the academic community, we can build the future of preprints with POSI. I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That license data was very interesting. Can I ask a very naive question that I definitely should know the answer to for Eliza at Research Square? Does Research Square, with their preprints, do the authors choose their license, or is the license chosen for them?
It's chosen for them. So yeah, we just let them know that it will be published on the CC BY 4.
And Shirley, is that the same for SSRN?
No, at SSRN, we really firmly believe in the rights of the author. And so the authors get to choose their own license.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how diverse bioRxiv and medRxiv were with their licenses.
Can I ask something then quickly?
Yeah, we have time.
About the license. How do we, I mean, in my experience, authors, it's really hard to find authors, and not just authors, who are knowledgeable and interested and really just savvy about licensing, different types of licensing. So when you let them choose, Shirley, I mean, do you explain? I mean, how do you make sure that?
How do we do it now, or how do I want to do it in the future?
Well, maybe both.
Yeah. I think now we kind of just let them fend for themselves. We're building a new submission system that'll come out next year. And one of the things I'm hoping to get in that is a little bit more robust, like here's your options, here's what they mean, here's the consequences to do more education. But we're not at that place now.
Okay. Thank you.
Stephanie? You're muted.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to chime in to say that Archive also strongly believes in the right of the author to choose, and so they do select from a series of licenses. And Archive's been around so long that the default license is pre there being CC BY, so there's an awful lot of content that's just on an exclusive right to distribute type of a license. Authors always maintain copyright in the work. We have had a recent uptick in people selecting CC BY over the last few years, but we struggle with knowing if people fully understand. We have a lot of discussions about what can we do better to help people really be clear about what it means when they select a license, especially because some of the journals that our authors might be submitting to don't want it to be on a certain license as the preprint. And we are also embarking on a big technology project, which will involve eventually making a lot of changes to our submission system. And in there, we are hoping to be able to provide more guidance about what it means to choose, CC BY versus the standard archive license versus some of the more limited CC BY versions.
Thank you. If anyone does have questions for Jennifer, I know Jennifer might have to nip out of this early, pop them in the chat because I think this leads us very nicely into the panel session, actually. So you've just heard from our three panel members there. And I think what would be nice to do before we start opening up the panel to questions is if each member of the panel could just do a quick sort of 2-3 minute overview of what your preprint server is and perhaps something that makes it unique compared to the others. I'm going to try and spotlight the three panelists. Let's see if that works. Stephanie, you're on my left, so maybe if you want to go first.
Okay. Yes, thank you. So Archive, as many of you know, is a preprint server that is very big in physics, computer science, and mathematics. We also, other subject areas are quantitative biology, quantitative finance, statistics, electrical engineering and system science, and economics. We are the oldest preprint service. We beat SSRN by a smidge, having originally been developed in 1991 by Paul Ginsberg at Los Alamos National Labs. Archive moved to Cornell University in 2001 and was part of the library there for many years, like 17 or 18 years. It then moved briefly in 2019 to the CIS department and then moved with the dean of that department to Cornell Tech in New York City in 2020. We're different, I think, in many ways, largely due to our longevity and our size. We currently have, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I have a slide deck from the other day open that has all my numbers on it. We've had 2.6 billion total downloads. We have over 5 million active monthly users. Our previous average monthly number of monthly submissions was around 15,500, but this year it has already jumped to over 16,000 submissions a month. Our staff has not increased along with the growth, so we have some growing pains there. Also, having been around for so long and having not successfully completed a full migration yet, we are relying a lot on a legacy system that more and more is unable to keep up with our growth. But the good news is we are in the middle of a project to fix that. But I think the growth and how long we've been operating are the key differences. And, Cornell having been the home now for, I can't do the math, from 2001 until 2023. I guess that's 22 years.
Thank you. Eliza?
Oh, yeah. I was already unmuted. Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, if you're still here for that presentation, because yeah, I think you know more about Research Square preprints than I do. Great, it's really some great data there. Research Square started posting preprints in October 2018 as an idea from American journal experts that was specialized in following, and still is, in offering services to editorial services to researchers. We specialize as a follow-up to that. We specialize mainly in biomedicine, biochemistry, medicine and public health. And then we also have some life sciences and much smaller percentage on that, and even smaller in other different disciplines, like maybe a bit of engineering and education. So those are our specializations. We almost hit as we saw from Jennifer's chart. Yeah, I think we reached the highest amount of posted preprints last year, when we reached the 100,000 mark, and actually went a little bit above. This year we're around, we might reach 75,000. We have concentrated recently more on volume than on developing some features that we would like to develop. Yeah, our main source of preprints, as has been said, is our partnership with Springer Nature. We were partially acquired by Springer Nature when we started in 2018, but now we are fully acquired. So also there's been a transition that is still ongoing. And yeah, you know, it does cause a stop, I would say, on some feature developments within preprints, but we would pick up again. So our partnership with Springer Nature is our main source of preprints. It comes through a program that's called In Review, and it's a group of selected journals selected by Springer Nature, for which the authors, while at the end of their submission to the journal, of their article submission to the journal, can choose to opt in to In Review, and whereby they have a preprint posted on our site on Research Square, and they have a public timeline that shows the progression of their of their article at Springer Nature through peer review. They also get a private timeline, authors, through us, a dashboard where they follow, you know, again, the progression of their preprint. This is our main journals that participate, Springer Nature journals that participate in review normally follow a hybrid or fully open access model. Not all of them. So there is this sort of synergy between our fully open access licensed, non-licensed by licensed preprint, and the journals at Springer Nature, but not all of them are open at Springer Nature. Then we have a smaller amount of preprints that come from direct submission, and just directly from our platform. And I think we see, especially in the context of our chat today, I personally see that growing direct submission is the best way to try to strengthen the open access environment, the community environment, and to make sure that it's sustainable. So we are sort of in between these two workflows, if you want. Yeah, I think there were a lot of interesting things that Jennifer said, especially the concept of forking. But I think we can talk about it later. I think more or less this is it for Research Square.
Thank you. And Shirley.
Great. Hi, everybody. I guess I want to start by saying I think commercial preprint servers can and do play a positive role in open access. That's certainly my view. SSRN was started quite a while ago, 30, 40 years ago, to be a place to have economics papers shared. It was started by Professor Mike Jensen because economics papers could take over 5 years to get through the peer review process, and nobody liked that. After that, it expanded into other social science areas. It's really big in law. And in 2016, joined with Elsevier, and since then has started an expansion from the social sciences and some humanities to pretty much cover every discipline under the sun, I like to say. We have biomedical, life, applied, physical, humanities, social sciences, you name it, we have it. And I think that is one of our big distinctives, the breadth of the disciplines we cover. And we're pretty excited about the way we can foster that interdisciplinary discovery because of that content scope. We are a very active site. We have over 1 million papers. We have 250 million downloads. In total volume and in total papers added per month, we're number 2 behind arXiv, which is the biggest. And I think in the biomedical space, if you look at the number of preprints added per month, we're number 3 behind Research Square, and then Cold Spring Harbor, you know, medRxiv and bioRxiv. So that's kind of where we sit in the scope. By joining Elsevier, it really allowed us to provide more services and features for our users. And we're really focused on the users. We kind of have 2 personas that we spend a lot of time thinking about. They're both researchers. One is the researcher who has content, that wants to share it and get feedback and get recognition and a DOI and all of that good stuff. And the other is the researcher who wants to find cutting edge new research. And those are the two people we spend our time thinking about prioritizing and facilitating and serving. And some of the things that being partnered with Elsevier has helped us do better has served those communities. So we have better search engine optimization than we had before we joined with Elsevier. I mentioned we're building a new submission platform because the thing we have now is really old and difficult to navigate. Another really cool thing we built is integration with Editorial Manager, and it's similar to what Eliza was talking about with the in review, where journals who use Editorial Manager as their submission platform can opt into our program called First Look. And same thing, the author gets a screen during the submission, clicks one thing, and then the paper simultaneously goes to SSRN as a preprint. It's been a really, really popular program for us. We have over 1,000 journals that are part of it. We are posting around 7,000 preprints a month just from this partnership. Authors really like it. About 25% of authors choose to opt in. So we know that those community, and that's across disciplines, not just one discipline. So we know that authors like it and are using it. And so we feel good about that kind of service that we're providing. The journals in the program are some of them are subscription, some are OA, some are hybrid. We have a variety of journals in the program. And I think we have found it to be a really effective way to introduce the concept of preprints to whole new communities. There's a lot of people, first time they've ever done a preprint is through this. And particularly in disciplines that have not been so much the forerunner, like physics, that in the economics, that were some of the earliest ones to adopt preprints. So yeah, we feel really good about that. We really think about just facilitating this sharing of research between authors and users. And yeah, I think that commercial preprint servers can play a positive role for open science.
It's like you're reading my mind, because that leads very nicely into my first question before I open up to everyone. So the theme of this week is community over commercialization, and we've twisted that a little bit with the title of this session, which is community and commercialization. And it is a delicate balance to strike, because as researchers, we like control over what we're doing. And there is sometimes a notion that commercial can be bad, which, as some of our board members keep pointing out when we have board meetings, that is not the case at all. And it's true, commercial elements have a lot of positive aspects that they bring to the research ecosystem. And so what I wanted to ask as a starting open question is, how do you each ensure you get that balance between making sure that the community gets what they need out of your different servers and their needs are met with the needs of making money and being sustainable, which is where my next question will lead into. So don't talk too much about sustainability too much. We'll go back around in the same order. So Stephanie.
So Archive is very solidly in the community space, no commercialization. I don't want to talk too much about the membership program and things like that if we're going to talk about sustainability later, but we do have some limited corporate sponsors. We do have scholarly societies that, well, they're not for profit, usually always, that support us. But we, our community of users and the scientists and our advisory boards are very strongly, very strongly support us remaining the type of organization that we are today. So we do think a lot about, people bring us a lot of interesting ideas of ways we could integrate or work with other organizations. And when we're having those conversations, we are thinking a lot about the types of organizations we might partner with and what it might look like externally, and things of that nature, to make sure that we're living up to the expectations of our primary user group and not entering into some sort of a relationship that they might think has too much of a whiff of commercialization. I think I don't have much more to say on the topic than that, just because of the the way we do operate and are independent. We're just kind of going about things a little bit differently than some of the others.
And Eliza?
Yeah, so Research Square, again, I think when you think of commercialization and open access and community, I think it's important for me to have a distinction between what is community-based and therefore free of the point of use, like the NHS. Research Square is green open access in terms of publishing, so free to the author to publish and free access for everyone. And I think that's important. And of course, it would be great if everything was free regardless. But the truth is, for now anyway, it can't, you do need some source of revenue from somewhere. So yes, we do have the backing of Springernator, but I think, again, it's really important to differentiate between access and publishing and perhaps other services that you can offer on the side, and maybe those can be paid services. One thing I would say about open access, I used to work for repositories that were green open access, unapologetically. Sustainability and funding can come if you believe in open access, in green open access. You grow the environment, and that means that you find big player, institutional player, big funders that will support what you're doing. And we're seeing governments, UK, US, having already open access requirements for research that they sponsor. So I think this is a really important space where you should, through the use of all the lovely open source software, PIDs, etc., that are available to the open science and open access community, try to grow this environment, make it more and more relevant, so that funders come in, and that eventually just brings to make green open access life easier.
And Shirley?
Yeah, at SSRN, our first stop is just the people who use our site, our researchers. There's 1.5 million people who have our authors with content on our site. We have a huge customer service team that responds to tracks and then feeds back to the rest of us the kind of things that we're hearing on the ground from the people who are actually using our site. So that's huge. We also have a pretty active Twitter community. And if we do something they don't like, they tell us about it, and we take it very seriously and try to respond. Additionally, we, just follow the research on research, the worldview of what people care about in scholarly communication, and identify metrics for how what we do might feed into that. So open access or whatever it is. And it's part of the way we develop our KPIs, and it's part of the way we prioritize what features we're going to build. So we know that the average user really prefers to get to the version of record over a preprint if it's available. And so we are actively working to build a link from our preprint to the version of record. So we carefully watch what people are saying, and we try to integrate them into the way we prioritize and run things. And then also, we're part of workshops like this. I think ASAP Bio does a wonderful job facilitating conversations and workshops that help us all put our heads together and think about how to do things better.
Thank you. So you've kind of all touched upon a little bit about how partnering with commercial entities have helped the services you can provide. So things like better search functionality. In my mind, probably one of the biggest benefits comes down to sustainability, because you're now not relying on grants and things like that. So what are your thoughts on sustainability from each of you, and how sustainable do you think the preprint system in its current form is? And I'm going to reverse the order and start with Shirley.
Yeah, I do think that's one of the huge benefits of a commercial relationship. And I think we've seen instances in which smaller preprint servers were relying on funding, or, the Center of Open Science had that wonderful preprint program, but when they started having to charge for it because their funding dried up, many small preprint servers were not able to make the money work, So I do think that that is a big advantage. We can, our content is stored on Amazon AWS. It's part of the Elsevier license. It's not going away. That content is going to be there in perpetuity, which is a big value, I think, of a preprint server. Yeah, I guess that's my answer. And money and other things like resources. So another example is, a lot of us are really curious about artificial intelligence and ChatGPT and things. I mean, I have the privilege of being a part of a very big organization that has a whole group of people looking into AI stuff. And I can tap into that. And we're running some experiments now in how we classify our content using artificial intelligence. If this was back in the 90s before we joined Elsevier, that just never would have been possible.
I think AI might be something to put background to. Eliza?
Yeah. Sustainability, we all think about it quite a lot. And there is, yes, a lot of, you do need finance backing because, as Shirley said, big teams of customer service, big teams or small of developers that, for example, try to use the AI to everybody's advantage. The way I think it could work is, again, if you try to make open science and open access a real added educational value, then you will get institutions to fund big projects, not even fund big projects, regularly sustain in time, the same way as you might have public health and public education. They will sustain this research and make it available for everybody. That probably needs a long transition, but I think we are already in the middle of that transition, and so we should try to really be the voice of this approach to education and research and open science. The other one is collaborations, I think, especially with open software. So we for example, we used to be part with repositories of big groups, some sponsored by the European Union, some sponsored by some universities or other institutions in the US, that really bring together developers mainly interested in open science and open source software, and they develop tools with a little bit of investment from all sides, and also maybe from publishers, from different sources of investment. They develop tools that can be then used by everybody, and this is something that Jennifer was also saying. Let's make our knowledge and our infrastructure open. That can be reused by everybody, saving a lot of expenses, a lot of cash for everybody. And for example, one of these is a project with metrics that we were part of, and we were developing metrics for with the open source software. We know that there's a lot of metrics are very important, as Shirley was saying, but at the same time, they're also very expensive. And even if it's just to have other players with other priorities and with other, with a different business structure to compete a bit with these commercial metrics providers, I think this can only be, this is a way to me to make the efforts sustainable.
And Stephanie?
So sustainability is something that Archive is always thinking about in terms of our own sustainability. although we are independent and not-for-profit, we are part of Cornell University, which is a university that is solid and not going anywhere. So we are very lucky to have them as our stewards. We no longer get direct contribution from them, but we do have a lot of indirect support in terms of office space and all those things that overhead pays for is covered for us in one way or another. We're also very grateful to the Simons Foundation, who has been a longtime major funder of archive. And there was an announcement out late last week that included a major gift from the Simons Foundation that's going to get us through this big technology migration that I alluded to earlier. But beyond that, for our normal day-to-day operations, we do rely on the community of our members, and we have a membership and affiliate program, and we have a fair amount of individual donations that come through every year. And in order to really grow, we need to keep that at a, figure out ways to grow those existing programs and diversify our funding. A little bit earlier this year, we made some announcements around the fact that we have reorganized our governance structure, and also more recently that we've engaged with IOI and are going through a strategic blueprint, the process of developing a strategic blueprint for archive. And all of that work is really looking at the long-term sustainability of archive. And a piece of the work that we're doing with IOI is to really dig into finances and what future expenses will look like for us once we get through the funded technology migration, and what we need to do to make sure that we have are in a position that we have the funds to support that. In terms of sustainability for preprints in the future in general, I guess I would expand that more really to like open infrastructures in general, because the thing I see is more and more competition in that space, and more people in the bigger open infrastructure place having membership programs, and everybody's kind of going to the same place for funding for the same thing, and something has to give. So I guess I would echo what Elisa was saying in terms of like the collaboration piece. And so the work that Archive is doing to modernize its system is going to put us in a better position to be able to work with others and not be so siloed, so that we can benefit in the future from more collaborative ways of doing things and not having to invent every wheel ourselves, which is kind of the situation we've been in for a while.
So we've had a question that's kind of related to collaboration. So I'm going to circle back around to that after this next question. So Laura has asked in the chat about Twitter or X or whatever it's going to call itself tomorrow. That has been quite, certainly in my experience, a big part of preprints, because it's so helpful to have that system there where it removes that whole barrier for a lot of people about getting their work out there. And preprints and Twitter, I think, have gone hand in hand brilliantly. But as we all know, Twitter is on a somewhat rapid decline. And so Laura's asking if you're seeing any changes in terms of users' behavior with Twitter, X. But I'm going to open up a little bit more and see, have you noticed a large group of your users going to a specific social media alternative that everyone else might also want to jump on? Because everyone's stuck on that, which one do we jump on bandwagon? We'll go with Eliza first.
Oh, I don't know if I can answer this question. We used to have Twitter, and then they made it, basically we're not tweeting our preprints anymore, because it's been moved to a paying system. So they blocked the access to the API, Twitter, X. And so we haven't paid those fees, and we're still kind of thinking about what to do. We'd like to encourage to put in place a system whereby researchers can facilitate the manually posting of the preprints, but it's nothing like what we had before. And this is a little bit of a case when commercialization comes into play very much at the forefront of our considerations, because, yeah, I mean, you are really starting to, if you put a high price on being able to have access to the Twitter API to tweet research, and that research, you start from the idea that that research should be free at the point of access and free for publishing. You know, you are moving into a really different space where only people who can pay access to the Twitter API can then share and distribute the preprint through Twitter, of course. So we just, for now, we're not doing it. We'll see.
Shirley?
Yeah, I'm not sure what we're doing that's different than what you were doing, but we don't pay for Twitter. We do a lot of tweeting, but we don't have the same sort of automated, like, you know, bioRxiv, I think, sends out automated things. We just do more hand curated tweeting. And we have definitely seen a drop in the engagement and response with Twitter. We're trying everything else, you know, just like throwing it at Mastodon, throwing it all over the place to see what happens. We have not found a great solution that I can recommend to anybody. I think we're all sort of scratching our heads about what to do now. We're putting more energy into our blog, which to me feels very retro, but, you know, we're just trying to experiment with different things to see how, you know, we can do our important role of helping people find the really interesting content that is hosted on our site. So, yeah.
Just quickly, I would look at Blue Sky, actually, but it has to. Yeah, definitely, because of the system they have for people to sign on. It's by invitation, I think. Well, also because, of course, it comes from, I think there's a potential there for having learned from the mistakes of Twitter in a way, and so now being a good, safer space for especially for something like our preprints. So yeah, I forgot about it, but personally, I'm looking at Blue Sky a lot, and it would be great if we could also hook up preprints to that.
Yeah.
I think bioRxiv and medRxiv certainly are now blue skying out.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and we're experimenting with them too. It sounds promising.
We have bioRxiv folk in the chat who are adding the things. So Sam, if I'm wrong on that, please do correct me. Stephanie?
Yeah, so Archive is on Twitter. We don't automatically push things. It's really just announcements or responses to people, things of that nature. But there is a lot of engagement around researchers posting their own works on Archive. And that does seem to still be a place where a lot of our researchers are. Having said that, we are aware and thinking about all the time, like, okay, what are we going to do about this Twitter situation? So we were just having conversations this week about Mastodon versus Blue Sky versus both. And we haven't made any decisions yet, but it seems likely that I could imagine us experimenting in both spaces and seeing where we get. So the main thing, we kind of had turnover in a marketing community engagement manager role this year. So the new person is, because we also can't use TweetDeck anymore. So we're looking to get a scheduling tool that would allow us to cross-post to multiple platforms that would make it easier for us to be engaged in various places so we can see how it shakes out. So I really appreciate the comments about Blue Sky. And that might be a good place to go. I'm going to pass that along. Thank you.
I mean, I would also, as just a small user, I would say that engagement on Blue Sky outside of Twitter is probably the next best. It's just annoying that's a closed system. Jessica has just opened herself up in the chat because she has Blue Sky invite codes if anyone wants any. She might be bombarded with messages. So cycling back around to the question about collaboration, and this is the thing where I would always like to see more collaboration. I'm a huge advocate for collaborating on absolutely everything ever. Anyone who follows my Twitter, for example, will see I just give out research ideas as they come to me. But the specific question has kind of come down to, I guess, interoperability. I hate that word. between the different preprint servers and sort of, I'm going to widen out a little bit again to how much do you all talk to each other and sort of work together to make sure that your systems are, sensible for each other? So, I think as someone submitting, it would be a lower barrier if, it was an easier system to submit because I was familiar with it between the different servers, that kind of stuff. So how much do you all collaborate? To bring the question bigger, we'll start back with Stephanie.
We have not been collaborating on technical things at all. I guess I don't know if that's surprising or not surprising to say. We do have regular meetings with the bioRxiv and medRxiv folks so that we try to stay a little more coordinated and aligned with them, and we're all kind of in New York City area too, even though we're not meeting face to face. But on the technology side, I'm not aware of collaborations happening. The system we're looking to build, a part of the thinking is that would end up being a system that other folks could use as their preprint system for making preprints available, but we haven't finished that system yet. We don't know what kind of uptake there would be on that, and we haven't started having those kinds of conversations yet.
Eliza?
No, I think we're not collaborating, unfortunately. I think we sort of hook up to different publishing systems, editorial manager, Snap, JP. I think at one point there was some interaction with Scholar One, but I wasn't at Research Square yet, so I don't know. But I think we used to. One of my dreams, I think, would be to be able to have a system that is open source and that is flexible enough to ingest adapt from different submission systems, from publishers, or it can be university presses, it can be societies. So, at that point, you would really have that sort of lively, a diverse environment. And also you could easily collaborate and sort of, again, create this synergy, and that really allows the open access environment thrive and grow and thrive. Yeah.
And Shirley?
Yeah, so Crossref has a preprint advisory council that I'm a part of, and that's been a really nice space for all of the different, preprint servers to be represented, and is actively working towards identifying ways in terms of, metadata. They're actually expanding their services that they give that help provide that link between the VOR and the preprint, for instance. So that's a space where I do see some really good collaboration with things that help for the interoperability. Again, ASAP Bio, I think the kinds of conversations that you host and some of the things that you do help us talk to each other. And, like what do you do with versions? People have different ways that we call about the versioning, but when we're all together, I was part of a working group that was hosted by ASAP Bio that was looking at all the different ways that we were all dealing with versioning and what do we think might be the best way. And, I'm using that when we're trying to build our next view of how we're doing versioning. So it's not like everybody had to sign a contract saying, yes, we agree, we're going to do it this way. But having the conversation and knowing how other people are thinking about it, I think helps each of us to do something that is in more alignment. And then someone mentioned editorial manager. That editorial manager can send it to any preprint server. That feature that they built, send to preprint, could go for any preprint server. And I'm sure, I don't know as much about the other submission systems, but I think some of those services are trying to build in a multiplicity of preprint. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a good point Laura has made in the chat that effectively everyone is collaborating a little bit in terms of persistent identifiers licensing. I mean, we've just come from a workshop about preprint, peer review metadata, and trying to get that kind of a bit more coherent and together. Yeah.
Sorry. No, quickly, because I also saw a question before about exactly the open specifications, how to make them. I think, yeah, for example, Crossref, there are some protocols that are developed in the open access world. Plan S is one, and for example, I've noticed something I didn't know, that Crossref uses the IPMH link for indexing, and that is an open protocol that means you can completely make your whole set of metadata, your whole archive interoperable, if that's the word. But definitely you can harvest, you can so working together on trying to join the standards, but to develop them together, because if one, if they only come from one source, then they may not suit everyone. But it would be really great to have, like Aether Bio does, but to participate in the workshop where you can modify these protocols and improve them, and also make them more flexible potentially, so that then there is, because they're very useful for sustainability, because they really help for discoverability and to create those wider networks that help support sustain.
So we've got a little bit of time for a few more questions. If anyone has any, feel free to stick your hand up or add it to the chat. I've got one, well, unless anyone has anything to add, I'll end on this question. Could you each talk about, bringing it back to community, how you are focusing on expanding preprints beyond just the global north? Because we've been having a lot of conversation at the moment with India in particular, but there's a growing sense that, I mean, we personally would love to see preprints adopted further than just Europe and the US primarily. But what kind of efforts are you putting in to try and do that and help those authors along? Because things like the APCs, for example, have been a huge barrier to those kind of areas where they just can't afford to do that. So obviously, there is a cost to preprint servers, the benefit being free for the author and reader, of course. But how are you thinking about expanding and sort of diversifying, I guess, in terms of both authors and users? I'm going to shoot the other way, so we'll start with Shirley.
Yeah, we are spending a lot of time thinking about this, and we do have more of a global spread both in our usage and our posting of papers than one might expect. We have for a long time hosted non-English language content. If someone gives the metadata and the abstract in English, they can post it in another language, and that's been true for decades. So that kind of helps, with that spread. We're also seeing with our First Look Journal program that I mentioned, a lot of diversity in the author pool that are coming in because they're applying to, they're submitting to our papers, and some of the journals, like there's a family of journals called KI that's in China. There's, 9 or 10 journals. We're seeing a huge number of Chinese applicants, so much so that we actually just reissued parts of our FAQs in Chinese to make sure that, people could understand what they were signing up for. Yeah, and then that's kind of some of the things we're focusing on right now.
Eliza?
Yes, I think that's an interesting way, Charlie, to post the non-English content, preprints with the metadata in English and then the content. We can't really do that because we do screen all our preprints before posting them, so and quality check in English, so with the screeners are. But it's interesting though, because the English metadata it can really be an interesting way to open preprints to non-English content in a relatively straightforward way. Yeah, I'm afraid we don't really reach out. I mean, we don't have any APC, so I guess that helps. We do some. We offer a free language score when somebody posts a preprint, so they can know if the English is not at the standard that it should be. And then we have separate services, digital editing, translation. We translate into Chinese, Latin, well, Spanish and Portuguese. Obviously, that's mainly the Latin American Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese markets. They are not free services, obviously, but potentially, if you can afford to price them in a really competitive, affordable way, I think that's a big help for researchers. The other reason why, I mean, not all research needs to be in English, and it can go a little bit around this circle, because you post in English because most of the research in English, and most of the research is in English because everybody posts in English. So you should break out of that if you can. But I think that helping non-English speakers to post in English maybe can then help to then develop their research profile at the same level. Even it kind of indirectly benefits the non-English speaking parts of the world and the developing countries. But definitely more could be done to try to reach out to institutions in around the globe.
Stephanie?
We do have global usage of archive. Unfortunately, I don't have those breakdowns and statistics like readily available. But having said that, it is overwhelmingly Western focused, despite some of the inroads that we've made. We also will accept non-English language papers as long as the abstract and metadata are in English. Part of what we are trying to do to expand and diversify our user base is being done through the governance reorganization that we just did. We're really making an effort to get new players into some of our governance and also into our moderator pools, so that we can expand sort of organically that way by being more thoughtful about researchers in parts of the world that have not traditionally been engaged with archive, and getting moderators from those locations. So we are just embarking on that. So it is going to take us a little while to get to that point. Our new editorial advisory committee that is responsible for moderator recruitment is just getting set up. So, but those are the long range plans for that group to work on a diversification strategy for archive. We are lucky to have a longtime member of our formerly Scientific Advisory Board, now Science Advisory Council, who is from India and who has helped us to recruit members from India. And that also, there's a lot of communications then that occur that help to raise awareness in countries. What we do see also, though, is this growing trend of countries wanting to have country-specific repositories. So, you have China Archive and Japan Archive. And so I think there's nothing stopping those researchers from having their preprints in both spaces, but there is a big push around some of those national initiatives that hinders a little bit the ability to get huge uptake into standalone preprint servers housed in the States.
I mean, to add to that a little bit from some of the conversations we've been having with Indian-based researchers, they were overwhelmingly against a regional country-specific preprint server. They found that there were too many risks of bias being put on to anything that we posted to a regional server. And they were much more along the lines of sort of field-specific servers or general servers. Which is just an interesting point to add. So we've got about 15-20 minutes time for what I'm hoping is going to be very interactive. It should work. And this isn't going to be done in silence, so we can still talk while we do this. So you will all see on your screen, if it's not already, a whiteboard. And there's some instructions to the left, but I'll try and give a quick explanation how this works. Basically, what I want you to do is imagine that you've kind of been jumped on a desert island, and for some reason, this desert island really, really needs a preprint server. I'm assuming all the water and electricity issues have been sorted out. What I want you to do is imagine yourself as a preprint server, and I just want you to drop in using the sticky notes that are on the left of the screen. If you drag a note and then you double click on it, you can type away, and the note will resize as you type. I'll also clean up as you go. So I'm asking you to think about how you would fund your server. So this is the red circle. I'm also asking you to kind of think about what server features you would have in place, or what you would offer the users, and by users, I mean readers and authors, and also maybe meta researchers. We also use your servers, but just a bit differently. And also how you would make decisions about your server. So this is kind of the governance thing that has come up a little bit in the discussions. This is open to everyone who's here. So even if you're not a preprint server, please add in and sort of just think about how you might do some of these things and what you would like to do with these. If you do have any questions for the panelists, we can feel free to keep dropping those in the chat, and we can do those as we do this process. Or we can do it in silence, but we can keep talking.
Do we need to use the post-it of the same color of the circle?
No, feel free, just go crazy.
It's a very important question.
What I will do when we finish this call over the weekend, I will clean these boards up and I will send these to everyone when they're finished. Your name won't be associated with anything you type. So feel, if you want to be super controversial, I'm not sure what you would write that would be controversial for any of these, but feel free to write freely. There's no one's going to be able to know who you are by the time the board's finished.
Johnny, the circle for what features would your server have? It would be great if we can move it to the back, but I don't have sufficient whiteboard knowledge to make that happen.
What do you mean move it to the back?
Currently, the post-its go underneath it.
Ooh, okay. Send to back. There you go. That should fix it. Yep.
Thank you.
We've been trialing out these whiteboards in a lot of the meetings we've been having. So also feel free to leave feedback in the chat about how this works. I like to try and bring a bit of interactivity to these. And add as much as you want to any of these points. If you can't fit it in the circle, put it adjacent to the circle. Like I said, I will clean these up afterwards. I see API really big on features that a server would have. I'm all for that one. We did a bit of research a couple of years ago where not all the servers have APIs, all that are easily accessible, and so this would be hugely beneficial to the meta research community, particularly.
I have a big.
Johnny, could you also send the big circle, the yellow circle to back? I think that one, I had some problems with the preprint, the stickers going. Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you.
I'll do the red one as well, just in case.
Oh, it's really big.
Okay. So these are not things that servers may currently do or offer or fund themselves. This is very much blue sky thinking. So really do go wild. And, if you think there's a brilliant way of funding things that might never happen, still put it in there. Be interesting to see what people come up with. And if anyone's typing anything out that they would like to expand on, I'm going to say raise your hand. I should be able to see that, and we can have a chat about that as well. Or if any of the participants or anyone from bioRxiv want to pick up on anything they're reading, feel free to. You can also, on a post-it note, if you click on a post-it note, there's a little pop-up bar that comes up, and there's an up and down arrow. You can click on that to add a vote to different things that people have written if you think something is particularly a good point. I'm going to add one to the API.
I'm not seeing how I can bump up the screen to read. Oh, all of a sudden, as soon as I said it, I saw it. So, okay.
Yeah, you should be able to scroll around the field. On a Mac, probably a bit easier because it's just the trackpad. On a mouse, I think it's right click and drag. I'm not absolutely certain on that. And while we're doing this, maybe maybe I do have more questions for each of the panelists. I think maybe a nicer ending point than the Global South would be a question about the future. So, for each of you, where do you see preprints in the future landscape of science communication? Which is a very open, broad question. I appreciate. Stephanie, we'll start with you.
Could you repeat the question very quickly?
Yes,
please?
I was going to say the same.
So where do you see the role of preprints in the future of science communication?
I think they are going to continue to play a very important part in science communication, particularly, I mean, speaking from an archive perspective in the fields in which archive is engaged. I mean, already in physics, there's a lot of users who only come to archive and don't actually go to traditional journals in their field. However, with the there's a lot of growth in the preprint space, and there's just like a lot of growth in the scholarly communication space in general. I think there need to be some thought and tools around ways to make it easier for researchers to parse all of the information that's being presented to them.
And Eliza?
I think I think preprints, like other forms of digitized, I hope, freely accessible forms of scholarship will thrive and become almost the norm. I think one useful way to do that also, and to make preprints and other such tools, like even repositories in general, scholarly output, research output, is to make it to expand its use within the in a learning setting. So universities with interaction, so use almost like an in-progress scholarly textbook. So really be more embedded in the everyday scholarly practice.
And Shirley?
Yeah, well, I definitely see a continuing role for preprints to play in the future. I think that one of the things that I mentioned at SSRN, one of the ways that we're a little different is that we are in the social sciences and the humanities and the hard sciences. And so, I sometimes wonder about, as we move to open, an API in life science looks really different than an API in the humanities or social science. And so might there be an additional and different role that preprints can play in supporting those kinds of scholarly communications alongside or separate from the journal publishing world? I think that's a whole nother pond to play in, if you want. I also think that preprints are really nicely posed to be sort of a sandbox for experimentation as we all try to think about what are these challenges. I mean, so there's like the peer review thing, which ASAP Bio is all over. There's the negative results and confirmatory results, which bioRxiv has a way that the authors can categorize those, and I'm jealous. But it's a way, I think preprints are just a wonderful space where it's a lower risk in some ways, because there's not, some of the other potential consequences if things go wrong with the journal, as with the journal publisher. To my view, we can just kind of try things, and and I would love to see more collaboration between like research thinking and using preprint servers as these sandboxes to just try things and see what we can learn.
I mean, you read my mind again, because that's kind of how I was going to sum up a little bit. I think one of the biggest benefits of preprints is that they are a space where you can experiment more. And I mean, we talked a little bit about different languages. there's nothing stopping somebody developing a tool that reliably translates scientific texts across languages that preprint servers would try out at the very least. I mean, I appreciate that. But, you know, those kinds of, I mean, that's where we've seen, for me, the biggest innovations in publishing has all been around preprints, because they are that sandbox, as you said. Google Translate does actually work pretty decently. I use that sometimes, as is mentioned in the chat there. So I'm going to leave this open for another few minutes. Does anyone have any questions? We've got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions, if anyone does have any.
Johnny,
I sort of, oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say, Johnny, do you mind if I get some clarification about the active community reviewing note? I put a note in the chat. I was curious whether, hi everyone, it's Sam from Bioarchive and MedArchive. I was just curious what role you see the preprint servers, that aspect. Is it to support third parties that are already trying to help the community get involved in community reviewing and provide preprint reviews, or do you think we should be actively recruiting reviewers, or is it, you know, something else? I'm curious what everyone thinks about that.
Whoever wrote that one, if you want to unmute and expand on that.
Sam, can you repeat the last bit? I started reading the questions in the chat.
Yeah, I put it in the chat, but I was just curious what role either the person who wrote this comment or just anyone on the call thinks that preprint servers should have in encouraging active community reviewing. Is it something that we as preprint servers should be, you know, actively recruiting reviewers and become more like a journal, or is it more about support and increased visibility of the third parties and the reviews that they've helped to generate on preprints? Or is it a cultural change that we need to all be working together to promote?
I mean, I can add it. I definitely.
Yeah, I think it's more of a cultural change, really, and I don't think that we should try to replicate what traditional journalists do. But again, I think that diversify and increase the interaction around a preprint or an article in a sort of a safe and self-regulated open space. I think that would then eventually support even the formal peer reviews, the traditional peer reviews of legacy publishers, because it would just sort of enrich that space in general.
So we've had a point in the chat that I've heard before as well. So there's this notion that the name preprint might actually be holding things back. Does anyone want to expand on that? Kava, you wrote, if you can unmute, you can expand on that if you'd like.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't prepared to speak, but yes, preprint suggests it's just before print. That says it all, really. If we're trying to experiment and do new things and publish small, collaborate in different ways. I know it's not easy to get away from it, but I feel that name is sort of, words are important, I feel. And there are a lot of words in publishing right now. There's print, there's issue, there's volume, there's, footnote. All of these things are, a footnote would be an annotation no one reads the footnote anymore. So that's what I was just saying, just as an idea.
Yeah, and they're not even printed, right? We're all in digital. So, you either repeat the words that were used in traditional publishing and just imagine them in a new context, or we'd have to really change all the vocabulary, which could be fun, but potentially a bit, I think we would lose some people along the way.
I
No,
think that
I fully agree. Sorry, I'll be quiet now. I fully agree, but it's just
Don't.
it's very difficult to get out of it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think to some degree, because of this pervasive notion of the version of record, I mean, that is really what we are to. Like the print part, everybody kind of knows we've moved on and we just stick with the old nomenclature. But it is, I think, around the notion of peer-reviewed version of record versus what happened before that. And I think it still is verticals out as to what it means then if the preprint is peer-reviewed. But I don't have much expanded thoughts or solutions there, just off the top of my head thought.
All right, thank you, everyone. We are just about time up. So I'm going to close the whiteboard now. I'll clean up a little bit and I will share that with everyone afterwards. So this is the end of our session. Huge thank you to the participants who've been on our panel and to Jennifer, who I think might have left now. It was very, very interesting. I found it very interesting, although I wasn't the one asking a lot of the questions. But a huge thank you to them, and huge thank you to everyone who came along as well. Hopefully you found it interesting. Hopefully that interactive exercise is useful for the preprint servers to have a little think about what the community wants, but also for those of you in the community to actually think about some of the things the preprint servers have to actually make decisions on and how they balance things a little bit, and how stressful I imagine it is to constantly be worried about funding and sustainability. Thank you, everyone. And I think there will be a recording of this. I just need to double check that, but it has been recorded. But thank you, everyone. And hopefully you all have great weekends.
Thanks.
Thank you. I hope we can keep in touch.